Hey, Buddy Manning here. Welcome to TD Garden, where the Celtics lost 117-108 to the Bulls. Noah Delzell alongside, and another interesting lineup adjustment for Joe Mazzulla here with Sam Hauser out of the lineup dealing with back spasms this time. A recurring back injury continues to plague him to start this season. Kristaps Porzingis returned from that heel pain in Washington. So a mostly full Celtics team turned to Jaden Springer off the bench after the Bulls went three guards without Josh Giddey in this one, played some Talen Horton-Tucker off the bench. And Joe Mazzulla said after the game that they were trying to combat Chicago's speed, spacing, with some on-ball defense from Springer, and I thought he brought that. Obviously, the offensive limitations with him didn't allow them to benefit even more from some of those looks. And a rusty Springer, I think, who's only played 26 minutes this game, had a few miscommunications, this season, with, I think, other players. And overall, just a sloppy defensive game from the Celtics, a disastrous offensive game. And it left us with those questions we've asked a bunch to start this year. What do you do when Hauser's out of the lineup? Because it feels like that back injury is going to be there for pretty much the entire season.
Yeah, and obviously, hopefully not. I did say, I have a little bit of concern about it just because it seems so lingering and potentially kind of chronic. But, Hauser provides a skill set that's not going to be replicable right now. But other than that, they've looked at Jordan Walsh earlier in the season. I think defensively he fits in. He seems pretty comfortable and confident. Offensively, he hasn't given them really anything. Drew Peterson seems to give them a little bit on both ends, so there's something to like there. I mean, he wasn't even here today, so clearly they're not prioritizing him too much, or else he wouldn't be doing these stints with Maine. And then Jaden, I knew his time was going to come eventually, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he's been blowing them out of the water. But at a certain point, if your whole thing is stay ready and you're going to get an opportunity, you got to get an opportunity at some point. And so I'm glad he got his opportunity today. I still love what he can do defensively, but at one point the offense has to come around, and it's hard. I don't want to write him off because of one game where he took maybe one or two shots. Like, that's not, he hits that three and he hits that layup. Maybe we're talking about his offense has come around. So I don't want to overreact, but ultimately none of these guys have shown enough in limited minutes that they can be a serviceable backup wing that you can really count on. And probably Drew Peterson is the one that I feel the most comfortable with right now, which I would not have imagined going into this year. But it leads to the question, do you go out there in the trade market? Do you look at free agents that are still available? Certainly, I think that's something that you're thinking about right now as you're the Celtics with a pretty near perfect roster, but this is the one spot.
Yeah, and they have multiple players now whose offensive limitations are hurting their ability to consistently get involved. And you would think Xavier Tillman in double big looks would be the front runner among all of these guys, and he's completely lost the trust of the coaching staff, it appears, due to that shooting limitation. And remember, he started a game earlier this year and missed 3 straight threes. So that's a tough one after you had him at the deadline last year, and you had Springer too, who you would have hoped would be more integrated at this point, especially after carrying him into the season. Some reports that you were looking to move on from him. Don't know exactly what ended up happening there. And of course, Lonnie Walker was in camp as a wing with some shooting upside and defensive growth since the earlier stage of his career. He's playing well in Lithuania. I don't know if that option's still there, but the more I see Hauser missing time to start this year and some of the limitations of the other players, Baylor Shireman as well, who they seem to be committing to Maine at this point for now, I think they're going to have to make a move here at some point, especially if Hauser misses more time. I do have some belief in Peterson. Maybe it's the defensive limitations there that they aren't super comfortable with, but compared to Springer tonight, who took one shot in the first half, missed a layup, and then missed a three in the second half, overall isn't a super confident offensive player. You loved how Peterson came right into that Cleveland game and just took shots, got involved on and off the ball. So I do want to see them test that out a little bit more before they make a move here. And he's obviously, I think, the front runner to get some depth wing minutes here. But you mentioned it, back in Maine, some of the main performances from him are a little underwhelming too.
Yeah.
So it's a question. It's one of the few questions we have this year, but we've mentioned it a bunch of times. Without Hauser, they're in a rotation bind.
Yeah, it's funny because Baylor's actually been a lot better than Drew in Maine. Part of it is just that he's had more continuity there. But
and I do want to see him at some point.
Yeah, and I think we will. It's still early in the season considering it's his rookie campaign. He has plenty of time to join them on a road trip in January, February, that sort of thing. But ultimately, probably it's gonna come down to is whether or not Hauser's injury is cause for concern for the Celtics, because we don't know. Maybe tonight was kind of precautionary. Maybe if this is a playoff game, he's a no-brainer, or maybe he has something that they're really concerned about and they've been downplaying it to us. They're obviously not going to give us much information about it, and maybe it leads them to think we really need to acquire a backup wing. I think ultimately the severity of this back thing, and obviously there's a lot of information that we just don't have, that's going to determine, I think, what they're going to do here with the trade deadline approaching.
Springer makes $4 million. That's a contract that's reportedly been in the mix as a trade piece for the Celtics ahead of the deadline on February 6th, as well as an open roster spot, which tax limitations prevented the Celtics from utilizing on Walker before the season. So we'll see what flexibility they have. It's not much. So internal options going to continue to be a focus going forward this year, and we'll see who's available on Saturday against the Bulls. Noah Dalzell will be there for SB Nation as well as CLNS Media here, and we'll have a Garden report after that game as well. 8 o'clock tip-off in Chicago on Saturday to begin a 2-game road trip between there and Orlando. We'll talk to you then. For now, for Noah, I'm Bobby Manning. Celtics lose to the Bulls 117-108 here at TD Garden.